Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime, here at my next Airspeed's Avatar Rewatch video. This one's going to be for Book 3 Fire, Episode 9, Nightmares and Daydreams. This one is animated by Moy Animation, and it's an interesting episode. It's a very unique episode. And unfortunately for me, in my personal experience, the way I rank it, to me, this is the worst episode of Avatar. I rank this bottom, 61 out of 61, because I think the Aang section of this episode, the Team Avatar section basically, is a complete waste of time. It's enjoyable for sure, which I'll get into. There's some fun things they do because they just go kind of completely crazy with the daydreams and the nightmares and so on. But it's, I think, poorly timed and has no real impact, which I'll get back to that. Thankfully, the other side of the episode, but it's like, the Zuko side is really just like a quarter of the episode, if even that. It's really good, the Zuko side of the episode, but unfortunately, you have 3/4 of the episode, which is this, probably the one episode where like it really feels like it's wasting your time, and there's the least takeaway from Aang's side of the episode. And I think the main reason why I dislike it so much is that the resolution to what is, I don't think not too bad of an idea of like a conflict of like, the invasion is just a few days away. The episode following this, we get into the invasion. How does, in this case, Aang deal with that, of the fact that it's right here, everything he's been training for is coming up next? How does he deal with that? I don't like that it's only Aang who they kind of have it's only Aang that they have an issue with this, and just Katara, Sokka, Toph, no problem whatsoever. They're all just like, oh, biggest battle of our lives, it's like in a few days, no problem, and it's just Aang like freaking out. It makes the episode feel a bit kind of unbalanced, that it's just him, and just like, wow, that makes Aang seem really like mentally kind of weak within the group, that he's the only one who has any sort of problem with it. And I think for sure the other members of the group have doubts, but they never show them in this episode really at all. Whereas I feel a better approach with this episode would have been to actually say, here's actually how each member of the group is dealing with preparation for the war. Maybe you have Aang freaking out a bit more than everyone else. You have maybe Katara dealing with it in a very different way, Sokka dealing with it in a different way, and then Toph. That would have been nice to more have, like, instead of just everything on Aang and the other three having these weird ways of trying to help Aang, you have just the core of the episode be like 4 kind of separate plots of just each member of the group as they struggle with whatever they're struggling with, and maybe they each kind of end up helping the other one kind of deal with the issue that they're having prior to the war, the battle happening. But as it is, it's just Aang starts to freak out, and they take such a comedic approach throughout the episode of tackling this, that it really basically takes away any sort of like character development that can actually come from it. Because the big problem is that the resolution for this is that the group basically all together say, we believe in you, Aang. You've trained, you're strong enough, we believe you can do it. And he finally goes to sleep. Like, that's the resolution for this, is just, I believe in you. Was that not implied by default anyway? Why did we need this to happen? Like, it's a nice scene, but it's so like, just, yeah, duh. Like, of course that was the case, but just the fact that that's what kind of brings it to an end, it means that there was never really a character problem, an issue for Aang. It was just literally him having like a case of the nerves, and he gets over it, and I think that's what makes it such a like light plot, that there's nothing to take away from this episode whatsoever really, because nothing that the group says to him or he learns in this episode like is so impactful going into the war that he's like, yes, my friends helped me through that moment of doubt before this, and because of that I can go forward. It's just, they believed in me. So that's what makes it not very interesting. Thankfully, the visuals are interesting. They take some take a good approach with regards to all these weird references and making it just seem so crazy and all over the place. There are a few kind of the little kind of segments that are well done, like the baby you're my forever girl scene is just it's always a really good one, because obviously everyone was like really hyped about how they'd approach having Katang kind of come together, and you know the way they play that scene, it's like, okay, is this just happening? Because it's Aang's freaking out, even though it's later revealed to be a dream. It's still him freaking out at the start, and then it just switches, and you can sort of tell with the approach that he has and the way he's speaking that it's not true. The other giveaway is that Aang's actually the same height as Katara, because it's his dream and he imagines himself as being the same height as her. But it's still a fun scene, and a kind of a setup for, I suppose, things to come. But you know, it's one of the few scenes, like you have Wang Fire therapy session, but it's those few good scenes mixed between, like, oh, here's Aang having a dream about, like, oh, confronting the Fire Lord, and it's about a math test. He's not wearing any pants. Here's Toph's approach to you know, getting Aang through this is just like, you know, putting him on this kind of bed of kind of pieces of earth and just ramming his back, and then the porcupine thing of acupuncture. It's just like they try so hard to be comedic that like only some of it hits properly. I get a lot of it's meant to be like anime kind of references. I don't think anything like crazy specific. It's just kind of meant to be this kind of amalgamation of like a little bit of everything, of like the kind of visual kind of tropes from all of the different animes and their kind of main protagonists. But it doesn't fit really here, because there isn't any, like, you know, notable substance to the section of the episode. Like, as I said, there's little bits. I like the return of the Wang Fire thing, and how Sokka seems to have a completely different approach when he has the beard. You have the setup of the fact that, oh, here's the armor that Sokka was planning to make earlier on. Here's the first look at it, and it seems to be pretty substantial, and he's making it. But other than that, it's just him freaking out, and very comedically. There's only one nightmare really in the whole episode, and while it's creepy for sure, it doesn't really have the same effect as like many of the other ones would have. Usually, like say Zuko's dreams, like, are very, very symbolic. This one here, it felt like they went just for pure kind of like nightmare kind of type thing of like, oh, here's Toph who's blind already, but now she actually just doesn't have any eyes. Here's like Katara being, like, you know, quote unquote killed. Here's the comet crashing into the planet, and it feels like, oh, we should be able to get all these interpretations out of it, but it's overall just meant to be, here's all these things that Aang knows are gonna like happen, and here's like worst case scenarios, really quickly shown in this one, you know, in a way that the nightmare ends up being the like tonally off piece of the episode, even though the episode's called Nightmares and Daydreams. But because all of them except the nightmare are just pure like craziness, this ends up being the one that kind of feels weird, and just in the end the least kind of impactful kind of part of the episode. But you know, thankfully there is a good side to this episode, and that is the Zuko section, which I think it's one of the best Mei and Zuko episodes, because it shows, I suppose, the strength of their relationship. That Zuko, for him, obviously, as he's more or less alluded to, and will, I suppose, allude to later on, Mei is basically one of the only kind of positives for him about being back in the Fire Nation now. It's been one of the only things that, in his mind, has been going well for him now. He kind of, at the start of this episode, is kind of forgetting about some of the other stuff, and begins to be like, okay, you know, here's some of the perks I have being Prince, about, like, I can ride around with the palanquin, I can get whatever, like, food I want whenever, and, you know, he's starting to really kind of feel like the Prince again. But then, of course, Mei reveals to him about the all-day war meeting, and he wasn't invited, so that immediately creates an issue that he wasn't invited, and Azula has been invited, and kind of teases him about it more or less, while implying that, you know, it's obvious you're meant to be there, like, no one's going to give out if you show up. But because, as Mei brings up, you know, because of his history with kind of war meeting type situations, like, of course he's rightfully a bit kind of on edge about, like, what exactly is going on here. And so it is this big moment when he is called and says, like, you know, the war meeting's not going to start until you show up, like, your father's waiting for you. And I like how they don't show you what actually happens in the war meeting. That they bring that back later on when Zuko's with the group to kind of establish, like, wait a second, you guys don't actually know Ozai's plan during the comet. Here's what it actually is. This is the meeting where they plan out what they're going to do when the comet actually arrives, the details of it. So Zuko having this information ends up being very important. But the big takeaway is, of course, that Zuko comes out, and we get, I think, what is one of the more impactful lines from Zuko in terms of really making his mind up, of like him basically saying, I was exactly the person my father kind of wanted me to be. I was the perfect prince. I didn't speak out of turn. I sat by his side, and I was everything that he wanted me to be, but I wasn't me. That the person Ozai wants is not the person that Zuko is. And Zuko now realizes, I suppose, the value in what Iroh was telling him in the earlier seasons about, who chose this destiny for you? Was it your father or was it you? And he's now realizing that the person Ozai wants is not the person that Zuko really wants to be. And that immediately creates this immediate rift that he can't be a part of this. And it's more or less this episode and this scene and him realizing, I suppose, what they said at the meeting combined with how he's feeling about being back in the capital, makes his mind up for him and explains kind of why he does what he does in the next 2 episodes, basically. But the other side of this episode, again, the main Zuko stuff, I like how supportive you see that May is, that she's aware of like all of the history. She knows about the original war meeting, she knows about obviously why he has the scar, of course, and kind of is very thoughtful in kind of how she approaches kind of dealing with him about that, of like, like she's very much like, oh, you were invited to the meeting, like you must be so happy, everything went well, that's what you wanted, right? And it's just her kind of, trying her best to kind of get him through this kind of tough time. And I like that in terms of, really showing you that, like, while at times they maybe overemphasize the whole I don't hate you too being their kind of dynamic, that here's some actually strong parts of their relationship as well, that they do actually both support each other, showing, like, I suppose why it is one of like the main canon ships in the series. So I definitely appreciate that as someone who's always kind of liked the May and Zuko relationship. But yeah, the takeaways from this are obviously pretty big in terms of Zuko having this information, mind more or less made up at this point, and the only real problem with him leaving is, of course, May. That if he leaves, she is basically the one thing that he'll be regretting in terms of leaving, because very clearly you sort of know with Zuko, he's not going to be the type of person to maybe ask May to betray everyone and come with him. He's going to take it all on himself, which, maybe speaks to some of the communication problems that Zuko still has, but you understand kind of why he does it, that he's not wanting to put any danger on her, because obviously I suppose in Zuko's mind, like, he's probably aware that if that happened, if he forced May to kind of side with him and leave, Azula would probably come after her, and that wouldn't be the best thing to happen. So basically making her just, she's not guilty for anything that Zuko's going to do type situation here. But I like the setup of this, that he has had this one positive relationship, and now that's the only thing standing in the way, really, of him actually going to leave at this point. But yeah, that's Nightmares and Daydreams. Overall, it's a fine episode. Like, I'd never say any episode of Avatar is just bad. As much as I rate this as my bottom episode, that's bottom of like an amazing series, and it's still good, extremely watchable. And as much as I criticize the Aang side of the episode, it is still, fun and entertaining. It's just, in the episode before the invasion, I felt there needed to be much more substance. As it is, basically, they do this exact Aang arc 10 times better with Sokka in the next episode. Sokka and his nerves about giving the invasion speech, and how they do the development on that front, is so much better done than like Aang's nerves about the invasion. And it's done in such a smaller amount of time, having to cram it into the very start of the first invasion episode, the big action episode, and here you have basically almost an entire episode to devote to Aang and his nerves, and you go, whoa, so over the top that you don't actually accomplish anything with it. And that's why I consider this to be such a weak, kind of time-wastery side of the episode. One of the few sections of an Avatar episode I would almost call filler. I felt like they really came to this episode and couldn't come up with a good enough idea about what's the feeling within the group just before the invasion plan. The invasion happens, and they just decided, let's just have Aang freak out and go crazy with it. And that didn't fit, given how otherwise impactful they managed to make most things in relation to character development. But, you know, it's not something that just ruins the entire episode, but it's enough for me to bring it down below a lot of other episodes and make it the worst. Because while there are other episodes that maybe overall don't have, you know, maybe the impact or like the importance of some aspects of this episode, like the Great Divide and so on, Body of the Water Tribe, I still feel that they're overall more complete episodes because at least there's an idea behind them, whereas this was just complete craziness. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this episode as well as what I had to say about it here. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.